Welcome, everybody. This is the DVMUG Zoom meeting. It is Tuesday, June 23rd, 2026, and we have a special guest today. Jason Snell is making his annual report for us about WWDC. And if you've been around, he's been doing this for years. He used to do it in person before there was the pandemic, and we love having him here. So welcome, Jason. I will stop my, I'll stop my share so you don't, oh, here it is, stop share. All right, you're good to go.
All right. Thank you. Yes. I mean, it is not as great because I don't get to see people, but I also don't have to drive to Pleasant Hill. So, pros and cons. It's from Marin County. It's a bit of a drive. So, and I just sit in my garage instead. It's a pretty good deal. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we schedule this around WWDC every year. Usually I've got a large set of tentpole features to run through. And this year I don't. This year is different. They have, like, in the briefings with Apple, before we could even ask them if this was a snow leopard kind of year, they said, "This is a snow leopard kind of year." Like, they just said it. This is we're trying to fix stuff and make everything work faster and just be better. And I've been using the betas for the last, week and a half, and the initial developer betas. And that seems about right. Like, there are bugs, but even as a beta, it seems pretty stable. And that's good. That's encouraging. The So I don't have the tentpole features. One of the challenges with talking about the little stuff is that there's just little stuff, and it kind of runs through your hands like sand or water or something, where you're trying to get a hold of like these little teeny tiny bits. Um, there's good bits, but a lot of it is teeny tiny bits. So I thought I would start. The one thing that they did that is the big thing is make good on their promises from 2 years ago, or at least start down the path of making good on their promises from 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, they said we're going to do um, AI stuff, and it's going to use your personal context, and it's going to be able to, because it's got access to your data that is your private data, it's going to be able to do things that a big cloud AI provider can't do, because you don't want to give them all your data and let them rifle through all your data. And that all sounded really good, but they couldn't do it. And part of the reason they couldn't do it is because their models weren't good enough, their AI models. And that, they fired, well, they didn't fire. They allowed their guy who was in charge of AI, who was a bad fit for suddenly needing to ship products. He was more, I would say, an academic kind of guy. They allowed him to retire gracefully with a golden parachute and replaced him. Um, and they've spent the last 2 years trying to figure out how to make their AI strategy work. Now, I will also say their AI strategy didn't really change on the top level of like what you want um, out of your AI. Like, it's still sort of what they said 2 years ago. The big difference is that they have models now. So they work with Google to train new Apple Foundation models, which is what they call it, their AI models. They're a little cagey about it, but they're not like Google models. They're Apple models trained with input from Google. It may be a process called distilling, which happens in AI, where you use the output of somebody else's AI model to train your model. It's a way you can improve your AI models. But they made a partnership with Google. And then the other thing that they did, technically, that's very different. 2 years ago, they introduced this concept of private cloud compute. And if you don't remember what that is, in short, they realized that there's a bunch of AI stuff that, even with the neural engine and all the stuff, the prowess of Apple's chips on your iPhone and on your Mac, there's stuff that just needs more power and memory than that, and it has to be in the cloud. And the problem with that is Apple's commitment to privacy. So they built this thing called private cloud compute. And the idea was it's end-to-end encrypted. The device on the server gets the data, processes it, and returns a response, and then throws all the data away. And it's gone. It's wiped. It's cryptographically unreachable. And they went to the point of like making the software that runs that available to researchers, and it's cryptographically signed. And the whole idea there is independent experts can look at it and say, yes, they're telling the truth. This is actually the case, that this is safe. And because it's cryptographically signed, if anybody tinkered with that to make it unsafe and not private, the signature would break. And Apple actually will not connect to a server that doesn't have a valid signature. So they built this architecture to create the goodness of on-device privacy, but the power of the cloud. The big change this year is that some of the models they're running are so big that they don't run on Apple's cloud. Apple's built a cloud with a bunch of like Apple Silicon servers and stuff, but it's not enough for what they want to do. And so what they've done is they've used Google as a partner, and Google servers that have NVIDIA chips in them, which none of Apple's things have, and that have Intel stuff in them that none of Apple's things have. And it basically said with NVIDIA and Intel's privacy stuff and Google's privacy stuff in Google's cloud, we are able to build servers that are running in Google's cloud infrastructure that are private and that are managed by Apple and are signed by Apple and follow all of those other private cloud compute rules where even though it's going to a different data center and it has some different hardware, all the other rules apply. It's end-to-end encrypted. It's independently verifiable as being private. It's signed so that if it is hacked in any way, the signature is invalid. And it's designed to process your request and then basically erase the key so that your data is gone and is irretrievable. So they did that because they realized they needed more power than they were able to provide themselves. So big changes on that end. But the other thing, the models, like, and it does seem good. They introduced a thing called Siri AI. It's in the betas. It's the good Siri we've wanted forever. It really is very good. Early returns are extremely encouraging for this. The funny thing is that wasn't the only problem in the last 2 years. The problem is that a lot of the things I think what happened is Apple, in addition to the models, Apple looked at what was going to be required to build the features they promised us 2 years ago and realized that there were a lot of people that were saying, yeah, we can do all this great stuff. And then when they analyzed the stuff that Apple already had that they thought they could use, they realized it wasn't as good as the people said it was. And so a lot of the changes that are happening in macOS and iOS 27 is about the infrastructure that the AI models use. And the best example I can give you is Spotlight. Now, Spotlight's fine. And Spotlight got better last year, but there's this underlying problem with Spotlight, which is that the Spotlight index is kind of not great, kind of not reliable. A lot of people reported that, Spotlight's fine until it stops working right, and then it doesn't work. And I experienced that myself in the last year. So I think how if you're an AI model and you're trying to like find out something that was in a message or a calendar event or a reminder or whatever, how do you find that stuff out? The answer was always you use essentially Spotlight for it. And it turned out Spotlight wasn't good enough. Turns out it wasn't good enough. So they rebuilt Spotlight for this year. So they had to build some infrastructure. They rebuilt Spotlight. They added a bunch of features to Shortcuts because they have a feature in Shortcuts that's really cool that uses an AI model. You type what you want Shortcuts to do, and it makes a shortcut for you. So you don't have to do anything that even remotely resembles programming. This is amazing, but they had to make a bunch of changes in order to make that work. And it really works. This is a little tangent, and I'll get back to Siri in a minute, but shortcuts, writing a shortcut with just telling it what you want it to be. As somebody who has been doing like Apple Script and stuff for decades, I feel like this is the closest we've come to that original dream. It goes back to Apple Script, maybe even all the way back to HyperTalk with HyperCard, of regular people who don't want to program being able to do automation on their devices of choice. Because you can literally say, every weekday morning at 6:00, send me a report or display a report with all of my events and to-dos for the day. You literally just type that and it makes a shortcut that does it and schedules it. And that's it. You don't have to do anything. And if it doesn't do it right, you can say, actually, can you make it so that it's at 7 a.m. on only Monday to Thursday? And it goes, okay. And it goes, chirp, 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 done. And it's done. and it's enabled. So pretty incredible. It's got its limits, it's got quirks, but like that's the kind of stuff that they're able to do, but they had to add a bunch of things to shortcuts to make it work that way. So again, infrastructure. They had to do a lot of behind the scenes work. Some of the behind the scenes work that they're calling Snow Leopard, which is that, it's we focused mostly on fixing things and making things work better. One of the reasons they fix things and made them work better is that they needed them to be fixed and work better so that they could do their AI stuff. But we all benefit from those features. If you use them, they're better. Like Spotlight being better is better, right? Regardless of Siri AI, Spotlight being better. Search in Apple Mail doing a better job of floating the most relevant responses to the top. That was a problem because they needed that for their AI, but it helps people who use Apple Mail, who are searching in Apple Mail too. It's not just for the AI. It's not a special AI feature. It's using the same feature that the rest of us are. It's just that it got prioritized because Apple needed it for Siri. So Siri AI, the way it works is it's complicated. It has a dispatcher. It basically looks at your query and says, okay, what do I need to do with this? And if it's something simple like turn the volume up or set a timer, it just does that on device and it's not a problem. If it's a more complicated query, it'll be like, can I handle this myself? And it may handle it itself on your device. Or it may say, oh, this is more complicated. This needs to go to the cloud, to the private cloud. And then it'll do that. And a lot of times it's actually even a hybrid of that, where what it's actually doing is it's saying, okay, I'm going to do a search and I'm going to get the results from Spotlight and I'm going to bundle up the top results from Spotlight and send those along with a query to the cloud. And then the cloud's going to think about it and give me a response back. So it's got the ability to kind of like figure out where everything needs to go. So and you don't really know. Some stuff will happen faster. Some stuff will happen slower. Some will happen on device, some will happen off device, but you may not even know. But Apple is giving you the privacy guarantee for all of it. That Apple can't even see your queries. They just happen and then they're discarded. You get the results back and that's the end of it. For those who are interested, there are actually like two models running on device. The highest end iPhones and iPads and Macs of the last few years have access to a larger model that has better speech synthesis and better dictation. And I've tried both of those. The new voices are weird and they're beta. They mispronounce words that do not have weird pronunciations. So I think they're still working on it. It mispronounced podcast for me when I tried it. And I'm like, that's not a hard word to pronounce. And it was like, podcast? I'm like, no, that's not it. What are you doing? I've tried the dictation though, and it's great. So like basically if you're on like an iPhone 17 Pro or an iPhone 17 Air or iPhone Air, or if you're on like an M4 or M5 iPad or an M3 or better Mac, I think it is. There's some very specific things. You get this better engine that has this new dictation in it, and the new dictation's a lot better. Like it is very good at inferring what all your punctuation is without you saying, hello, exclamation point. I'm wondering if, comma, considering everything, comma, we might want to have dinner, question mark. Like the new dictation is much better. You just spew out all those words and it's like, I know how to punctuate this. And it's like, it's encouraging. So we're already seeing this stratification where some devices are more capable of running more powerful models. And that's going to keep happening, right? I think Apple is going to keep having this situation where the newer devices are going to be able to do stuff better, but not that the old devices are not going to be able to do stuff. But obviously, if you've got a much fresher chip and more memory, you're going to be able to do more stuff. And that's going to happen over time, like any computer thing. That's, I think, what we're seeing. So in the cloud, there are also multiple models, and there's a lower effort model and there's a higher effort model. And obviously, it's in Apple's best interest to do things on device or on the lower effort model because the higher effort model is the most expensive. But some stuff is. So one of the new features that's in beyond Siri AI is they added a bunch of AI features into Photos. Most notably extend and reframe, and those use those use a very expensive model on the server that allow you to basically take the crop of your photo and go the other way and make it wider, and then it fills in contextually. That works pretty well, although I took a picture. So my son just graduated from college. I took a picture of him that they sent us that or we bought, but like of him with his diploma afterward, right after he walked off the stage. And I expanded it because it was really tightly cropped. I expanded it to give a little more space around him. And it did it, except it added this thing that's like hanging down from the ceiling that's like a giant tassel, like from his mortarboard, but it's like a decoration. And then it also put like a table with a weird lamp on it. I'm like, that was weird. But in I would say more rich environments like a backyard or something like that where there's trees and plants and stuff, you can like if you need it to be a little wider, a little taller, it actually does a pretty good job. And then the reframing feature is using a bunch of stuff that they built for Vision Pro, the idea that you can scan an image, which you do on device, and it's so good. Those AI models are so good at basically creating a 3D depth map out of a 2D image without even portrait mode and multiple and like LiDAR. You don't need any of that. It's actually so good that you don't need any of that. And you can turn any. So what it does, this is spatial reframe, is it does that, builds a depth map, and then gives you a little preview where you can move it around. It is the same feature that in Vision Pro allows you to kind of like lean left and right and see the 3D effect. And you can also do that on the iPhone in 26, but it's just a like an effect. It's a fake 3D effect. This one, so you spatial reframe, you do the scan, and then you can move your finger around or your thumb around, and you can literally slide the perspective a little bit left and right or to up and down, just as if you were looking. But when you get it to that different angle, you can press a button, and what it does is it sends that off to the server, and it generates a high quality version, much higher quality than the version that you would see in Vision Pro or something like that. Um, so it's from a different angle. How does it do that? Well, parallax means things closer to you move more than things further away from you. And the challenge with reframing something like that is you've revealed some background that wasn't there. Well, that's just like the cropping feature. They can generate the background. And you've revealed, like behind an object, you've revealed a little bit of that part that wasn't there before. And it uses, again, AI generation to fill in that little tiny background part behind the person. Works pretty well. Some stuff looks fake. Some stuff looks good. I think it comes down to it's not even about the AI model on the rendering side. I feel like their little clever scan for a depth map is rough, and I think it's vague but good enough if you're just kind of moving your head around. But if you're doing a high quality render, sometimes I think that it's like not getting the shape of the faces right because it's just like, yeah, there's a face there, like it's a mannequin or something. And then you change it so that that person's face rotates a little and the shape isn't right because it didn't actually get the whole shape of the face. It just got kind of like there's a head there. Let's put a head circle there. And I don't know whether they're going to fix that or not. Sometimes it's uncanny. Sometimes it's really cool. You can do it with old shots. I reframed a slide scan that my wife's parents made in like 1970. It works. I mean, it'll work because it doesn't need any special data. It just intuits the depth from the 2D image itself. So much AI stuff, but all of it pretty good, all of it pretty impressive, I would say. And Siri AI, like the promise is that Siri AI, it can go out and answer your questions, sort of like a simple, like a chat GPT. Years ago, Apple built its own search engine that it uses for things like Safari, auto suggest. They're relying on that for a lot of information if you're asking questions about the world. But it also has access to your spotlight. So think of it this way, that you could search and find things, but it's work, right? It's like, is that an email? Is that in messages? Where did I put that? And if you ask Siri AI, it does the queries for you. It gets the results back. it figures out what you want and it summarizes it for you. And it's not perfect, but I've had some amazing interactions with it. My favorite is I have a podcast I do with a couple friends of mine. We're watching an old TV show. We're watching Magnum PI. It was a pandemic project that I guess we're gonna watch all of them now. That's a lot of episodes. It was on for 7 years. So we do a messages thread where we talk about what episodes we're going to watch next. And every time it comes time for me to sit down and watch those episodes for the podcast, I'm like, oh yeah, what are we doing? I didn't write it down. We just said in messages what it would be. And I got to scroll back and find it. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's these two. I just asked Siri AI, what were the episodes we're doing for the podcast with David and Phil? And it got it. It did it. It spun a little bit. It was searching. It got the context. I did another one this weekend. 2 years ago, my wife and I went to a concert down in the South Bay at Mountain Winery. And living in Mill Valley is like, concert gets over and then it's like a 90-minute drive home. And that was our anniversary. And we decided we're just going to get a hotel down in the South Bay. Got up the next day and we're going to do a brunch and then we're going to go home. And a friend of mine, Dan Frakes, who used to work at Macworld, works at Apple now, and he lives there. He lives one exit away from Apple. It's a pretty good commute for him. And I remember 2 years ago, I texted him and said, what are your recommendations for brunch places in the South Bay? So this weekend, I asked Siri AI, what were the brunch places Dan Frakes recommended to me a couple years ago? And it pulled them all out. I didn't need to search. I didn't need to scroll back. I knew Dan recommended them and it found them and said, here are the ones. And it even summarized them and said, he says this one's a little expensive, but nice. And he said this one he really likes. And like, that's it. I mean, again, not perfect. They probably have more work to do. It's not going to give you what you want every time. But the early results of Siri AI, I would say, are really good. There's a bunch of other stuff in 27. Like I said, it's a bunch of little stuff. They keep pushing the Vision Pro forward. I think that's an interesting example where that product is not ready for anybody to buy it, but I think they hope that it will be the base of something that people will buy someday. And so I like that they keep updating it. They added there's a little like glowing Siri orb that you can just look at and give commands to, which I think was always the plan, but Siri wasn't good enough to do it. And they'll let you use maybe my favorite feature of Vision Pro is that you can turn your panoramas into these kind of like immersive panoramas, the ones you shoot on your iPhone. And now you can do that and you can use them as like the environment that you're working in. So I like have a great panorama from Scotland and I can just put it up and then I'm just in Scotland for a while. It's pretty cool. And then, everything else is the little stuff. So the shortcuts are better. The spotlight is better. There's some good iPad stuff. You can just, after a year where it was in limbo, like now you can just have the menu bar show up when you're in multi-window mode on the iPad, just like the Mac. It's not in the center. It's on the left. Just a bunch of really nice stuff like that. So a lot of little things that I normally have as the center of my presentation, but I don't have it because there's just hundreds of tiny fixes here and there in the operating systems. So I've been talking for almost half an hour. And the big story is, the AI features and Siri AI. Usually when I come to these meetings, there are lots of great questions. And I've been doing this for 30 years now. I appreciate the fact that I get to be paid to do for a living to think about what Apple is doing, whereas all of you think about what Apple is doing, but have to do other things with your life. I am your agent who is tasked with just thinking about this all the time. So I'm happy to answer questions, and I thought maybe that would be the best way to spend the rest of my time with you is if you have questions. I might have answers, I might not, but let's try. So I don't know how we want to do this. I'm happy to take your questions.
I've got a question.
Go ahead, Kenji.
Those Siri AI features you were just talking about, like it going in and searching back for stuff, will those be dependent on having the the 12 gigabytes of unified memory?
You have to have Apple Intelligence. These are all still Apple Intelligence features with the same restrictions. So if you have a device that's capable of Apple Intelligence, as they've been saying for 2 years, Siri AI should work with it.
Okay, what are the features that won't work and there have been a couple of recent Macworld articles and Mac Rumor articles saying that some features require, like for instance, at least a 17 Pro iPhone.
It's actually not that. I mean, okay, it is features that won't work, sort of, but like, there are better versions of those features that are for these higher end models that are more recent. But right now, the only two that they're talking about. So I think right now the only two that they're actually using, it's the speech synthesis. They've got a model that does a much better job of doing the robot voice that talks to you. Like I said, it's in beta and it mispronounces a bunch of words. But in the end, there's probably going to be it's actually not that surprising, right? It's the idea that if you've got a better chip, the voice is going to sound more human, I think. And then the dictation. If you've got the better chip and you do dictation, it's going to be better. The responses are going to be more accurate. But that's it right now, they say. It's just that. Those are the only features that they're using the really big model for that requires the higher end. I'm imagining they will add stuff over time. The question is how much of that is going to be, you can't do this without this new phone or new Mac, and how much of it is going to be, you can do it, but it's not going to be as good because we just don't have the power to make to have it be better. That we don't know because it's only these two features they're talking about right now. But right now, it's just literally speech and dictation.
Is there something they were talking about, the image manipulation that has to go to the cloud, and if you have to have a 200 gig iCloud Plus account because the images are big or something like that?
No, it's weirder than that. There is a limit on the number of. So if you wanted to sit down and go, I'm going to send I'm going to, spatially reframe and extend a bunch of images right now, you would run out. It will say, you've reached your limit for the day after a while, because each of those has a tangible cost to Apple because it's using a server model that they're paying for. So you can hit a limit. I don't know what the limit is. They're not sure they want to tell us what the limit is. They may not even know what the limit is, but there is going to be a limit. If you are an iCloud Plus subscriber, which is defined as being you pay Apple and get more storage, that includes the 99-cent a month iCloud storage plan. You don't have to have a lot of storage, and it's not actually for the storage. It's just like, it's the same thing that gives you the security, or what is it called now? I'm blanking on it. It's the iCloud private relay. It's a feature that's gated, but it's barely gated. It's like, just give us some money for anything, and then you're good. So you could be like an Apple One bundle person paying lots of money, or you could be paying 99 cents. But if it's enough to get you to iCloud Plus, then you get private relay. According to Apple, you will also get more time on that server to do your spatial reframes and whatever else you're doing. Not unlimited, right? But more. And again, they're being super vague about it. We don't really know. But the idea there, I think, is that there's an actual cost, and like, Apple's going to let the people who are not giving them any money for server stuff to use a certain amount for free. And then after that, the actual cost, if it's somebody who's got an ongoing relationship with Apple where they're paying them for services, then that include iCloud, then okay, then you can get more. But how much more, we don't know. And there's probably still a limit, because again, every single one of these you do, there is an actual tangible cost associated with it. It's not, if it's happening on your device, it's kind of a freebie, but if it's happening in the cloud, it can get expensive. And keep in mind how many users Apple has, right? Like, so many people that they're trying to protect themselves by setting a maximum. That said, I think their goal is that most people should never run into the limits. But like I said, if you sit down and like, I'm going to bust the limits, I'm going to spend all day spatially reframing and extending photos, then you will hit the limits.
What do you think? I've heard that they have hardware, the Mac, the AirPod and the TV hardware has been ready, and it's the software they need Siri AI to do the tricks.
Mark
And
Gurman
it's
at Bloomberg.
just sitting there
Yeah.
waiting to go.
Yeah, Mark Gurman at Bloomberg has said that they have a whole home initiative that includes a bunch of stuff that really relies on there being a good Siri. Because remember, 2 years ago they thought there'd be a good Siri, and it didn't happen. And that stuff is, in many cases, he says, designed and ready to go, or maybe even made
Built. Yeah.
and ready to go. And they can't release it because there's no Siri for it to have. So I would imagine that a lot of those products are going to get announced this fall. There's like a kind of HomePod with a screen slash, maybe it's a home control screen that you can dock to a speaker, but whatever it is, it's supposed to be driven by Siri, and you need Siri AI to do it, and they didn't have it. And there's some other stuff like that. There's also HomePods with cameras, although he says that's going to come next year, that are going to be used not to take pictures, but for visual intelligence. I should say one of the other features that got updated in 27 is they sort of visual intelligence has kind of been replaced by a Siri area in the camera app. I think it works really well. I've tried that too, where I basically like take my camera out and take a picture of like a tag on a shirt with the laundry instructions on it, and it says this is made out of polyester and you shouldn't put bleach on it and all of that, and it just does it, and I don't have to ask. Or with on 26 visual intelligence, like you take a picture and then you're like, there are some buttons that you could push. Which one's the right one? Is it the Google button or the Ask the AI button? And like it sort of handles a lot of that stuff for you now, which is also really nice.
And there's a dedicated Siri app, I understand.
There is a Siri app. Thank you. You're backfilling the things that I didn't talk about. Siri up to now has been this kind of disposable thing. And since like with chatbots and stuff, you can go back to an old conversation and it understands the context and stuff like that. You can do that with Siri now. The Siri app, you don't need to run the Siri app to talk to Siri, but the Siri app is almost like it's a catalog of all your past conversations with Siri, and you can set it to like delete after 30 days or 3 months or a week or a year or never, just like messages. And it's like your conversations with Siri, which means that if you ask Siri something and got an answer, and then you're like, what was the answer? You can go see it, which you couldn't do with existing Siri because it didn't remember anything. So that's a good feature of it. And also, if you just want to go and pick up that conversation and either talk or type to it and get more answers in the context of that conversation, you can just go to the Siri app and do that.
It does that even though you don't use a Siri app. It remembers all your just, hey, Siri.
Yeah, it remembers everything. It remembers all your Siri interactions, and it syncs them across all your devices. So if you asked a question on your iPhone, you can actually look back on the Siri app on the Mac later and find that answer.
But what about the watch? It seems natural that you would ask the watch and talk to the watch all the time. And would that go to the phone to do the?
Yeah, I am in the process of updating my watch to watchOS 27. So I don't know exactly how that's working yet. But yeah, you would think that the watch would channel the iPhone, and certainly AirPods will, but I don't know how that will work with a watch. So I don't have an answer there. Rick keeps raising his hand. We should let Rick say something.
Yeah, I have a question about sort of off subject, but regarding these subscriptions to these new premium software programs, so much of it, many of us will never use, but it's really irksome that we have to pay a bundle price just to be able to use the new versions of Pages, Numbers, and Keynote. Is there any rumor or rumble that they may unbundle that so that you could just pay a small fee for a year or so to use it?
Yeah, so there are no rumbles about that, although I've definitely complained about it, and I hope that enough people have that they might rethink some of those ideas. But I want to be clear, you don't have to pay to use the new versions of Numbers and Keynote.
Yeah, that's true, but you don't get the advantage of the new features.
What you don't get the premium templates, or which are templates, or they have some AI features that are not that interesting, but they're using like OpenAI models to suggest some stuff to you. I agree that's annoying, but just to be clear about it, like those are the otherwise, you can use those apps just fine for free. I hate it. I hate that they put it in a creative bundle because there's plenty of people who use Pages and Numbers and Keynote who don't need Final Cut. And the
Right.
idea that they've connected them in that way. Look, here's the truth of it is the App Store is incredibly limited at what developers can do and sell as bundles. And I talked about things that Apple fixed because Apple is a good customer of itself. It didn't fix any of those. So like part of this is I think that bundle is all misshapen and weird because the App Store isn't very good at letting them have more flexibility. But I think it's a mistake. I think that they should never have bundled those apps in with the Creator Studio. I think that was a huge mistake. I hope they change it. I agree. People who don't need Final Cut should just be able to pay something to get nice new features in Keynote and the other apps. And also, I just hate the idea that those apps that are meant to be free and make your Apple devices better are now kind of freemium and want to sell you on a bundle. Although they have updated those apps, they are not as aggressive with trying to sell you the bundle as they used to be, which is good. I think they got the feedback there that they were too aggressive at saying, oh, you should get this bundle. And it's like, well, if I'm not interested, you should just shut up and let me do my work. Bill in the chat said, do you get bugged every time you launch the older app? The answer is yes, because it'll tell you need to get the new app every time you launch the old app. So you should get the new app. The new apps are fine. And those are the ones that are going to get updated. And there will be feature updates. You just need to tell it, I don't want your bundle. And then they work fine. So
Now,
I use them
I
all the
have
time.
created some custom templates. Will those transfer over?
Yeah, those are all fine.
Okay.
Everything else is the same. They just created some new templates for people who are subscribers, and they added a few AI features that, to be honest, are not that interesting. So
Great. Cool.
I would just use the new ones.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hello.
Hello, Don. Can you hear
Angie
us?
has a question.
Oh, okay. Sure. I thought I saw Don talk, but
What are-
yes.
What are the chances that Apple will redesign the App Store to be more user-friendly? So when you type in the name of the app you want, it doesn't show you 20 other apps before you find the app that you actually asked about.
It's a great question. I mean, their search engine could be better, but the other thing is they want to show you a bunch of things that people have paid ads for, which again, not a fan of ads covering, it's bad on two levels. So like you search for an app and you know what it is, and instead it shows you its competitors, and then it shows you the app. And that's bad for you because you knew what you were searching for and it didn't want to give it to you. But I want to turn the tables on that statement and say it's also bad for the developer of that app, because what essentially Apple is doing is extorting money out of all of its developers, saying, if you don't pay us for ads on the name of your app, your competitors will, and they'll steal your customers. And it's like a protection racket. I hate it. I think this is one of those cases where Apple's desire for incremental revenue has overridden its focus on the customer in a way that is, I think they've lost their compass on some of that stuff. And I don't know, there's a bunch of new people coming into management, including a new CEO. I really hope that somebody has the strength to say, yes, we really like that we make money. We make lots of money, but making money at the expense of the usability of our products and at the expense of frustration of our users is too far. We shouldn't do it. And the fact that they forced, I mean, literally, there's been so much written about Apple taking 30%, or for a lot of smaller developers, 15% of their revenue. Not enough is made of the fact that after Apple gives them their 70%, they then take back some portion of that 70% because they force them essentially to buy ads on the App Store so that people will find their app. I do not like it. So what are the chances? It will literally require somebody like John Turnus, the new CEO, to say, I don't like how gross that is. That's a bridge too far. We need to have, he's going to have to say, and it's going to have to be the CEO. We need a culture shift because some of this stuff is too far. Now, it's a challenge. Back in my job when I worked at Macworld, this was my job every day. We had a bunch of sales and business development people who would come in and say, "I've got this thing that will make us $10,000 a year," and the CEO would be like, "Great, why wouldn't we do it?" And I'll say, "Well, because it puts a bunch of garbage all over the web pages that the people are trying to read." And makes them harder to read, which means they're going to not like coming to our website and they're going to stop coming to our website. It's like, oh, Jason, but it is no fun to be the person who says you're degrading the quality of our product because the other side is like, yeah, but money, we're going to make more money. And honestly, you got to have somebody in a position of authority with backbone to say that's too far. And I got to be honest, Tim Cook and the old CFO, Luca Maestri, like their focus was bring in more money. And I would argue to a fault that they brought in a lot of money. They didn't need to bring in quite as much money and they would have still been incredibly profitable and their product would have been better. It's a fine line between making money and degrading your product. I think there are lots of ways where it's valid. I do think there are places where it goes too far, and App Store search is a great example of it.
Aren't they being forced to unlock us from having to use the iOS App Store?
Only if you're in Europe or Brazil or maybe Japan. It may happen elsewhere, but not without a fight. And honestly, I mean, we'll see. The App Store, the alternative app stores in Europe are not particularly interesting. But having Apple have to compete might make Apple behave better. I actually think it's better. It would be better. I actually hate that Europe wants everybody to use somebody else's app store because it just changes who the gatekeepers are. I would much rather that they have the ability to do what the Mac does, which is let developers just sell their apps directly and let people download them and install them. And, Apple has a whole process. I wrote a whole column about this a couple of years ago called "The Mac is the Model." Like Apple, everybody's a registered Apple developer who develops Mac software, almost everybody. And in order to distribute Mac software yourself, not on the App Store, you still need to cryptographically sign it and then have Apple scan it and sign it and approve it. And it's not like App Store approval, but it runs an automated scan for malware. And if something bad is in there, they have a kill switch. They can kill it later. Not even in the App Store. They can just kill it. There's a whole infrastructure for third-party apps on the Mac that they could apply to the iPad and the iPhone. But why, if you don't have to? So maybe someday they will be forced to, because that's what it's going to take. They will have to be forced to do that.
Yeah, Gatekeeper is pretty locked down in Tahoe. If you download something, it says, no, you can't do it. Put it in the trash. You have to know to go into preferences and say, yes, okay. And then it asks you for your password 2 times. It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for stuff that's not notarized. So it's stuff it's not everything that's out of the App Store. It's the stuff that is out of the App Store and Apple doesn't know who the developer is.
Right.
I talked to the Mac security people a little while ago, and what they told me is a lot of the security change. First off, I was actually on a briefing and I said, I went to WWDC in San Jose like 7 years ago, and somebody from the security team stood on stage and said, "We will never prevent Mac users from running software on their computers if they really want to." And the guy I was talking to in the briefing was like, "Yeah, that was me." I said, "Well," and he said, "Nope, that is still our commitment to you." What they're balancing it with is scams, social engineering, and malware. So the reason it's so annoying to launch an app that hasn't been notarized now is because people were putting out malware that was not notarized. And it used to be you could control click on that app and choose open and then click OK and it launched. And that was very easy for them to walk somebody through on the phone or on a step-by-step document on a web page. And then the malware is running and they've got your computer. And so they made it a lot harder. It's only on first launch. It's Gatekeeper, right? Which is a thing that checks the first time an app launches, and then it doesn't do it again. So what they told me is that entirely closed that
Absolutely.
that loophole. They really like the scammers stopped trying that approach because now you've got to go to the system settings. It's just enough hoops to jump through that the scammers figure they can't even talk somebody through into doing it. So they moved on to the next thing. The next thing was pasting things into the terminal. Here's some text. Copy this, open the terminal app, paste this in, put in your password, and then the malware is installed. But they don't know this. They don't even understand it. They think they're fixing their computer or something. So this spring, there's a Mac OS update released that looks at your clipboard when you try to paste something into the terminal. They actually have like anti-malware protections on pasting into terminal. Why? Because it was a vector for scammers, and they're trying to protect them. Now, again, will that annoy a power user? Probably. Although they say actually it's smarter than that. Like if you've got like developer tools installed or you've got Homebrew installed or something like that, they actually back off, they say. And they say the first 24 hours that after you've installed software, if you're doing like a software update or whatever, they also back off because they know that that's a time when you're installing a bunch of software and stuff, and they loosen their protections a little bit. But the sense I got from them talking about security is they're following where the scammers are going, and they feel like with the terminal stuff, they've really put the clamps on them, and it's unclear where they're going to go next. But the Apple has been chasing the scammers on the Mac into a tighter and tighter corner. And the question is just going to be, what do they try next? And Apple's paying attention to that. So, they're trying to balance what we want to do with our computers. It's not really about them controlling our computers as much as it is that a computer is, unlike an iPhone or an iPad, a computer is a lot easier to subvert, and they're trying to find ways to protect non-technical users especially, but sometimes technical users can get phished and talked into doing things too. So that's the backstory there. But after talking to them about it, I really got the better sense of like why they're doing what they're doing.
I think they're doing a good job because we do a clinic once a month. And years ago, every computer that we would see, we'd run malware bytes on it. It had all kinds of stuff on it. We don't see any of that anymore.
Yeah. No, it's a lot harder now. They made it a lot harder. And the terminal thing, I think, is really clever, right? Because that's like cryptic, but it can like download and install software right from there. Just ask for like a password. You can really kind of hide it so that you don't even see as a user what's going on. And so, yeah, Apple's response to that is now Apple is like, because you can't just type those in. You got to have people paste them in, right? And now Apple looks at the paste and will block things and say, I think this is dangerous and you might not want to do it, which is really interesting. So they're trying. I saw...
Will that still be visible to if you're using a third-party clipboard app?
The clipboard's the clipboard. I think so. I think if it's actually on, if you're doing Command V in terminal, like the third-party clipboard app is still has to put that content on the clipboard. So I think yes.
Okay, cool.
I saw Rick with a hand.
But I want to let you finish this subject first because I want to go back to that European Union thing. I have a couple of questions about that.
Any other parts? I'm not sure there was more there. Go ahead, Rick.
Okay. Well, one of the things that's disappointing about Apple is some of their advertising. For instance, the translation feature in the earbuds. That's not going to work in the European Union. I have a whole list of stuff. Siri AI won't work there. Apple Intelligence won't work there. iPhone mirroring won't work there.
Yep.
SharePlay screen sharing, AirPods live translation, and tap to share. None of that's going to work in the European Union.
Right.
So if I have American equipment and I go there, is there some big magic switch that's going to turn those features off for me?
No, actually, there's a lot of grace. If you're visiting Europe, I think you've got, I forget the time, but it's like 6 weeks or 2 months or 3 months. There's a period you've got an American Apple ID and you go to Europe. Yeah. The gates don't come down on you. The jaws don't close in on you. It knows that you've got an American Apple ID and a timer gets set. If you move to Europe after some period of time, it'll say, you've been in Europe an awfully long time. I think we need to follow the European laws now. But it's not, it's structured to not apply to people who are visiting. And similarly, I mean, that also means you can't install an app store while you're in Europe. It won't let you because you're not a European. You're not considered a European user. Similarly, if a European comes to America, the gates don't like open wide and suddenly Apple Intelligence is there because they know they've got an EU Apple ID or Apple account.
Wow.
So they try to be smart about it.
They have been advertising this direct translation stuff though with the AirPods, and it's unfortunate that it's not going to be as advertised if you're sitting in a French cafe with a French friend who's got AirPods.
Yeah. Well, and they're adding primarily European languages, and it's like, how's that going to work? I think some of those features will come in the EU. They are gradually rolling some of those features out. Some of it has to do with implementation details, like that they have to make it available to some other headphones, or they have to make like they are implementing some features that then get clearance from the EC to put those things in the European Union, but the one that right now looks like it's never going to come is Siri AI, and that's because the EU says you have to let third-party AIs have access to all your user data, and Apple's like, no, it's not. Apple said actually we can build a thing where there's like a trusted model where they have to agree to certain things and all of that, and the EU is like, well, you could build it, and we'll tell you whether it qualifies or not. And Apple's like, this is going to be an 18-month long project with a huge investment. You can't tell us if it will be good enough. And they said, no, we can't tell you. And they're like, well, then we're not going to do it. But they're at loggerheads there because they and I think this is the case. I'm actually sympathetic to a lot of the EU's thoughts about Apple and its lack of competition. But in this one, they're completely, I think, around the bend about it because they think that it's more important to let OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, and X have unfettered access to your Spotlight queries of all of your personal data than it is to protect your user data, which is a thing that they seem to care a lot about, except they'd rather have competition like this. And when Apple says, well, wait a second, we cannot in good conscience let these random AI providers have unfettered access to all the personal data on our devices because they'll just siphon it all off. The EU's like, sorry, competition. And I think they've completely missed the plot on that one. So we'll see what happens. But there are a bunch of EU features that are slowly trickling in as Apple adds whatever the EC thinks is necessary.
What about, we heard about they were proposing requiring user replaceable batteries. How would that work on an iPhone?
Yeah, it's unclear. There are a lot of caveats to a bunch of this stuff. Like I think the battery restriction is something like it has to be reasonably accessible for a battery replacement, but like user replaceable battery, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a sliding door on the back and you can pop the battery out with your fingers. There's a level of, like, for example, Apple used to glue in their batteries, and I don't think they do now. And so that's an example where like a technician that doesn't have to belong to Apple can open up your iPhone and pop out the battery and put another battery in. And it sounds to me like a lot of these things get said as being, oh, here's this thing that's going to completely destroy what Apple is doing. And the truth is it won't, because Apple's devices don't qualify, or because Apple is meeting the letter of the law, but it's because what's required is not what you think it is. So I guess what I would say is I don't think I would worry about it. And especially, again, what they do in the EU, I mean, we'll see. If it, like, I think they're inclined, I don't think they want to stop selling iPhones in the EU. So I think they do what they want, but they also are going to only do what they feel is absolutely required of them. So like making everything USB-C, it's not that hard, not that big a deal. Making the batteries relatively easy for a technician to remove and replace, not that big a deal. I mean, I'm sure it was a big project, but it's something they can do. If the EU tomorrow said you got to have a sliding door on the back of your phone so you can pop out a thing, I think Apple would be like, we're not going to do that. But it is a conversation between device manufacturers and the EU. I think the EU has, in most cases, some idea of what's actually realistic in terms of the engineering. And if there's a big blow up where there's something where they don't agree at all, like with Siri AI, we'll all hear about it.
It wouldn't be just Apple, it would affect, all
It
phones.
would affect everybody. Yeah.
Everybody.
And again, there's a certain point at which you would say, I like selling devices in your country, but I'm not going to change my design or build a one-off design for you. And they know that too, right? Like, I think that there's some degree of practicality in some of the regulators in the EU.
Yeah. One further question on that.
Okay.
If I'm abroad and for some reason or other my telephone gets stolen, my iPhone gets stolen, and I go to an Apple store and I said, I want a new phone, and then I access my cloud to restore the phone, will I be able to get the American features back when I get back to the United States because of that American Apple ID?
That's a really good hypothetical. I think depending on how you do it, they may be able to get you an American model because they do vary slightly sometimes. This happened with my friend Mike Hurley, who got an American iPhone, took it back to the UK, then it was broken, and they replaced it with an American iPhone, even though he was a UK customer with a UK Apple ID. I believe the way it would work, regardless of the model, is that you would get that phone and log in with your American Apple ID, and then it would work because it's a US Apple ID.
Yeah.
It's not about, because again, the truth is these devices are not that different market to market. Sometimes the radio frequency coverage is a little bit different, but like basically they want to make them the same everywhere. So it all comes down to the software. And since everybody is logged in with an ID, that ID is connected to their geography. So like they know you're an American. And I have friends who are in Europe who have American Apple IDs, and they work differently because they're like my friend Federico in Rome is using Siri AI because he has an American Apple ID. And so he's using Siri AI. So, where your ID is from matters the most.
Yeah.
Or account. It's Apple accounts now. I keep saying Apple ID. But
right.
Your Apple accounts are all geo locked, and they know where you're from and where your credit cards are from. And that's how it works.
So Siri AI is English American only to start, right?
To start, they say they're going to roll out more. I would imagine that through the fall and maybe even into next year, they'll roll it out in more languages. They've said as much. I just don't know the details. No, they haven't said the details, but they say that there's more to come there. They're just going to start with English. Any last question? It's been about an hour, but
anybody else?
Can you tell us a little bit about whether you learned anything about the OpenAI versus Google agreements issues and whether that's going to impact us in some way?
I imagine that Apple's agreement with OpenAI has some sort of exclusivity window that will probably end. Everybody expects, so you've got the ability to like toggle to ask OpenAI something, to ask ChatGPT something. And right now, ChatGPT is the only option there. I think my guess is that there's an exclusivity window that will close probably in September when it's been 2 years since they made that deal. And that at that point, some other providers will appear in there. But honestly, the premise of Siri AI is that you don't need them. So, I mean, they'll be there. And if you want to flip over and ask a question of ChatGPT, you can do it. But like the goal is that, I mean, first off, they're not Siri AI. They don't have access to your stuff. And you could just use those apps, but it's also there. It's weird. I think it's a vestige of Apple's old strategy a little bit. OpenAI is not really happy about how that's gone the last 2 years, and that Apple's now using Google. But like in the end, I don't think it's going to matter. I think it's going to be irrelevant. Put it that
Well,
way.
the only reason I ask is supposedly there are a lot of lawsuits out there by OpenAI against Apple.
Nope, there are no lawsuits.
No? Okay,
Nope.
great.
OpenAI planted a story in on a website, a business website, in which they said that, and they definitely came to Mark Gurman, I think it was Bloomberg and Mark Gurman, and said, hey, we just want to let you know that we're unhappy with our relationship with Apple, and we're talking to lawyers about maybe suing them, which is the weakest. I mean, it's such a transparent, like you can't even, like you can file a lawsuit about anything. It was very clearly OpenAI saying, we want to make a little bit of a public tantrum so that Apple sees that we're unhappy with them and maybe it'll show us a little more love. I don't know if that worked. I wouldn't think that threatening a lawsuit would work, but who knows what they're thinking there. But the fact that they didn't even file a lawsuit, they just leaked a story saying they were talking to lawyers about maybe filing a lawsuit. Come on. So there's nothing there. There's nothing there. And I would be shocked if there's a lawsuit. And if there is, it won't matter. It'll be irrelevant.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I squeeze in a couple of
Okay, sure.
questions here?
Yeah.
One is, what is your feeling in general about using antivirus software on Mac or iOS?
Well, on iOS, it's pointless. And on macOS, I don't think most people need to. The system does a pretty good job of protecting you. There's antivirus built into macOS and has been for many years, and it updates in the background, and it's looking at your apps and it's looking for known malware, and if it finds it, it kills it, and that it's completely invisible to you, and it just happens. So I'm not sure anybody needs more than that.
And cool. And my other question is, before you got here, somebody was asking about should they buy an iPhone? Should I buy a 17 now, or wait and face price up increases on the 18? Do you think there's going to be any magic on the 18 that they'll regret buying a 17 now?
It's really hard to say. I'm sure they'll be better. And if you're price sensitive, now is probably a pretty good time because the next iPhones will not cost what the current iPhones do. Bottom line. I mean, it might only be $100 more, $150 more. And I guess that's the classic question, which is, will you pay a little bit less for a little bit less? Or are you willing to grit your teeth and pay that extra $100, $150, $200 to get the latest and greatest? But this, it used to be, why would I buy an iPhone 17 now? The iPhone 18 will come out. By the way, the iPhone 18 is probably not coming out in the fall. It's probably coming out in the spring. The 18 Pro is probably coming out in the fall. Right. They're probably going to move the regular 18 to the spring. So you have to wait longer. But it used to be, well, why would I get this now? Because the new one's coming out. Well, now we know the answer is that the new one's going to cost more. If the current one doesn't get its price raised in the meantime, the new one's certainly going to cost more. So I think there's no right answer there. Judge accordingly. But you know that it's going to cost more. So I think it really just comes down to price sensitivity. I just bought my daughter a new laptop. A friend of mine just bought a new laptop. The thought there is like, I basically need it now, and waiting around is not going to get me. It used to be waiting around would just get you a better computer. And now waiting around gets you a bigger price tag and a better computer or phone or whatever. So that's just where we are and will be for the next couple of years.
There's always something newer and better.
Always.
If you need it, buy it now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's even more so now, though, because now we know that it's going to be more expensive, too. It's not even going to be the same price. It's going to be more expensive. Everything is going to be more expensive. So, there's always, I mean, I wouldn't buy something the day before the new thing comes out, right? Like that's like, well, maybe I should see what the new thing is, but it's definitely tilted more toward just going ahead and buying something now because everybody, I mean, Tim Cook said it to the Wall Street Journal, we're going to
Yeah.
We're going to raise the prices. That's the bottom line. Judy, did I see a hand there?
Well, I was the one that asked the question because I have a 12 now, and I know I'm having issues with the 12. And what I read was that if I buy the 17, I should buy the Pro because that can run the new AI, but the 17 that's not the Pro isn't going to be able to. Is that?
Yeah, but again, right now, all that is the better voices and the better dictation. Like the other stuff's still going to be there. And the 17 is, I'm just going to put in a plug here. The 17 is a great phone. Like it's great. It's the cheaper one, and yet they added so many of the features that used to just be Pro only. But in the 17's got them. So there's a lot. I mean, I have a 17 Pro, orange. I love it. But like the 17 is really, really, really good for a good price. So I wouldn't worry about it. Like, yeah, if you get the Pro and spend more money on the Pro, and if you can get a deal on a Pro, even better. It's got that great zoom camera, and it is going to run those new models. But the new models are, like I said, they're limited use. They are not everything. It's literally just not as good speech synthesis and not as good dictation. That's all. So I think you do fine with either one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was wondering about this.
Situation.
Go ahead, Gary.
The situation may be different for watches, though, because each watch ends up with new hardware features and new health features and things.
No, I mean, some years the watches are almost identical and they don't even bump the processor every year. But I do wonder, like I said, I don't know enough about what the limitations are of the current watch hardware. It's possible that the watch hardware this fall will be better at working with devices like the phone that have Siri AI on them. I don't know, but I think the watch is a little less clear. I agree than some of the other products are,
because 27 won't even run on many of the existing watches.
Well, that's true. If you've got a watch that doesn't even run 27, then that's going to be something you need to pay attention to. So, all right, I think I need to go.
Okay.
But
thank you very much, Jason.
I thank you all. I'm sorry I don't get to come in person anymore, but we just don't do that anymore. But my dog and my cats appreciate that I'm still in the house. So
you're a great friend to DVMUG, and we really appreciate it.
We do.
Thank you. Great seeing you all again. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Jump in the car and drive over here one of these days.
Well, that was great.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop the recording and start a Q&A recording. Stand by.